Hello, and welcome to Beyond Biglaw, Money Management for Lawyers.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Beyond Biglaw with Jessica Medina Esquire. I'm Matt Skye, and Jessica is a former lawyer and accredited financial counselor. She transitioned from a successful law career to financial coaching to help people achieve financial stability. Join us as we explore how she uses her legal background and financial expertise to guide attorneys toward their true passions. Thank you so much, Jessica, for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm excited for this conversation.
Let's get into the topic of today. We're looking at vision planning and addressing your emotional history with money. Jumping right in, maybe share us a little more about your journey from practicing law to becoming a financial coach. We were talking about this off camera. That's a pretty big transition.
It is, and also I think it's not. So I was a counselor at law for many years, and then I switched over to becoming an accredited financial counselor. So I still do a lot of counseling for my clients, but instead of doing it in the legal field, I now do it with respect to money and helping them, work through any money issues they may be addressing. And the way that I came to the transition, as with many lawyers, at some point, I fell out of love with the law. If you know a lot of lawyers, you probably know a lot of unhappy ones. That was my experience after several years of practicing. I think I had always wanted to be a lawyer ever since I was young, but after spending a couple of years actually doing the work and understanding what went into being a lawyer, it was fairly adversarial, confrontational. That is not my natural state of being, and so I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought that I would. And then, of course, I went through the requisite existential crisis of what do I do with myself?
Have the requisite existential crisis, yeah.
Right. What do I do with myself if I'm not a lawyer? I've only been this my entire life and my entire career. And so as I was thinking about where could I go next, at that point, I was working at the Securities and Exchange Commission. I was in the Division of Enforcement. I was investigating the nasty underbelly of the financial industry. And I realized I would love to help people with their own financial journeys, because getting my own personal finances in line and getting them really stable was a huge part of my journey as an attorney. It was actually what led me to have the courage to leave the practice of law entirely. And so when I was looking for a new career, I stumbled across becoming an accredited financial counselor, because we do not deal with investments or tax strategies or financial products or estate planning. And because of that, they're not regulated by anyone, including the SEC. So I didn't really know about them. But I came across the program, I came across this accreditation, and it felt so in line with what I wanted to help people with respect to money. And it just became a very natural transition for me from practicing law, being unhappy, and now working as an accredited financial counselor with attorneys who might be unhappy and looking to make a transition.
So when it comes to that transition, what are some of the major blockers, I guess you could say?
So I think for a lot of attorneys, whenever they're considering a new career, even if it means just practicing law in a different way, they may remain lawyers, but maybe they're trying to leave their firm, or they want to leave firm practice to go to the government or work in nonprofit. There's a lot of fear and trepidation around what are you going to do about the money. A lot of attorneys that I work with are making fairly good salaries. They're on a trajectory career-wise to continue making very good money if they stay at their firm, right? If they make partner. That doesn't always happen for everyone. That's literally one of the designs of the system. But that is the carrot that is dangled in front of them for most of their career. And so the idea of leaving that, of leaving the potential for that kind of earning capacity, leaving the prestige, leaving the fact that you might be a trailblazer in your own community, those become really big hurdles for my clients. And the reason why I understand it so well is because they were hurdles for me. It was really hard for me to come to the decision to leave my law firm. I actually ended up staying way longer than I ever anticipated that I would. And so I help my attorney clients work through, of course, the financial piece of making a transition, feeling confident that you'll be able to afford your life, even if you change your job, but also working through some of the things that you might be thinking about in terms of your career trajectory and how you define success and how you define prestige. And so I feel like I bring a really unique perspective to this type of transition planning, and my attorney clients seem to agree.
Well, just on that point on achieving financial stability, that's such a challenge for so many people, and it's something always top of mind. What were some key strategies you used to achieve that yourself?
So when I was practicing, I left law school and went straight to a large firm. So in terms of kind of attorney salaries for beginning attorneys, I was pretty much at the top of the scale. That being said, I was a single mom to twins, and so living in the DC area, area. I had a very high cost of living. I was the head of household all by myself, and I felt like my salary really didn't go as far as I needed it to. So I struggled a lot early in my career trying to balance, how do I manage this new professional job that I have with all of its professional demands, and also manage money that I've never had to manage before in this way. And so as somebody who did not grow up in a family that spoke about money, educated me about money, or really had the means to even have an understanding of how to manage the kind of money that I was making, I felt very alone and very illiterate when it came to financial concepts and, just principles. And so I really just bumbled around for a number of years while I was practicing. Thankfully, I continued to make more money. So that kind of, made up for some of my mistakes and my missteps. But when I went to the government, I took a 50% pay cut. So I needed to get my act together really, really quickly in order to manage that for my family. And so that was part of it, right? Just kind of trial by fire and starting to figure out how to manage life on way less of a salary. But I also found the financial independence movement. And that really gave me the sense that I could potentially leave the law one day if I got my ducks in a row. So I started to become very aggressive when it came to paying down my outstanding debts, including my student loans, which I had pretty much just stuck on the back burner for a number of years, and also creating long-term wealth and really building up my long-term reserves to a point where I felt like if I left my very prestigious and, lucrative legal career, I wouldn't necessarily have to make the same types of retirement contributions to still have a sufficient nest egg at the end of the road. That's what I was aiming for. And for anyone who's familiar with the financial independence movement, I hit Coast FI, and then I decided to dip out and start doing something else with my career. In the meantime, I also met my husband. And so I want to give credence to the fact that not being a sole breadwinner was a really large piece of me being able to supercharge my exit from the law. I did have a plan if I had remained single for the rest of my life, but having him there and having another breadwinner in the house certainly made things go a lot faster. But that's how we created the stability that I needed as a naturally risk-averse person to really make the leap and go out and try something new.
Kudos to you for pursuing your passions and taking that leap. It's such a scary thing for so many people. I want to ask you a little bit about how your legal background has shaped your approach to financial planning.
So, like I said, I used to be a counselor at law, and now I'm an accredited financial counselor. So I think my legal background has actually had so many transferable skills that I've brought over to my financial coaching practice. I'm an excellent listener. I love to ask questions. I love to answer questions, right? A lot of lawyers enjoy being the expert in the room, and I have not lost that in my transition to becoming an accredited financial counselor. But I also find that my clients who are also attorneys really appreciate someone who will sit with them and answer all of their questions. They are already uncomfortable asking someone about money. It's already embarrassing for them. They're used to being the expert in the room and not being able to feel like they have full control over the money in their life or the decisions that they're making or how their finances are affecting their future. That's really uncomfortable for professionals who are used to having all the answers. So I spend an inordinate amount of my time making sure that my clients understand why we're pursuing particular types of strategies, what strategies we could have pursued, but maybe aren't a good fit for them and why. And I feel like it gives them a level of comfort that they don't get when they just read something about personal finance in a book, or if they're meeting with maybe a different type of financial professional that doesn't have the time to really sit and explain thoroughly so that they understand why they're doing something. My clients are very action oriented. They're very good at implementing plans. But if they don't understand why the plan makes sense, they're not going to do it. And so we spend a lot of time on the front end getting that buy-in, making sure that they feel motivated, that they understand why they're doing something, how it will benefit them. And then the implementation comes pretty naturally.
I think there's a common misconception that lawyers don't face financial challenges. I'm sure you hear that all the time, like, oh, they're a lawyer. But then just curious, what are those challenges and how do you help, people navigate them?
I think that is one of the biggest myths, right? That all lawyers make gobs and gobs of money. There's this particular strata of lawyers that make a lot of money, but They really are the minority. And so that is not something that law schools tell you. you when you're showing up and paying through the nose for your law school education. So one of the first things that many lawyers suffer from is an insufferable amount of student loan debt. I have some clients who are facing over $400,000 of student loan debt. Now, granted, they have a lot of degrees, but that being said, all of my typical clients are probably in the range of at least $200K. That's pretty average coming out of law school. And the average law school debt for a law school graduate is $145,000. We compare that to the typical American college graduate that comes out with $35,000. There's very different strategies for $145,000 compared to $35,000. And so I help my clients first and foremost understand whatever student loan debt they may be carrying, since 90% of my clients have it, and both the emotional and mathematical considerations they need to take into account in order to figure out the best strategy for them. Beyond just the student loan debt, a lot of lawyers struggle with just managing their day-to-day cash flow. For the lawyers who are making money, they may be the first professional in their family. They may not have ever been taught how to manage the kind of money they have coming in. They may have an experience where they're used to living paycheck to paycheck. You can still live paycheck to paycheck even when your paycheck is quite large. It just means it isn't going toward long-term goals, right? And so I definitely help my clients think through, do they like where their money is going? Is it going toward things that are important to them? And is all of their money going to their present day circumstances? Or are they also carving out a piece for the future circumstances where they might want to have a little bit more stability? And then in terms of other, kind of lawyer issues that I see, because the practice of law is so stressful, a lot of my clients suffer from convenience-based spending, right? There's a lot in their budget that just goes to making their life a little bit easier because work is very hard. Their weekends are filled with work, their evenings are filled with work. And so a lot of their budget may go to things like extended daycare, Uber's taking you to and from, DoorDash, Amazon deliveries, last minute vacations that then get canceled that you can't get refunded for. And so we start thinking through, if you change the nature of your work experience, how might that change the nature of your spending? And we do some of that work with my lawyers that are interested in transitions to give them a sense of how their life could be different and their budget.
That's such a great point, because you're right. When you're under a high pressure career, sometimes you have all these expenditures just to keep yourself mentally afloat, basically. So once you start to redefine that, it can change. But can you elaborate a little bit for us on vision planning and why that's important as lawyers transition their careers?
Yes. When I'm working with someone who is thinking about a career transition, I have a whole process that I take them through to help them craft their exit plan strategy. And although many people would assume that the first step is, let's look at all your numbers, let's get all the numbers on the table, let's start, sifting through where you're spending money and where we can cut things, I don't start there.
Dave Ramsey it.
Oh, yes. We would have to do a whole episode on how I feel about Dave Ramsey and all of the shaming that goes on. I never even paid attention to Dave Ramsey. I just get him, tangentially and anecdotally, and I'm already traumatized thinking about it.
But this is a different approach. Yeah.
A very different approach. Yes. If you like Dave Ramsey, I'm not the coach for you. Keep moving. There's plenty of them out there. But one of the things that I think is so important, and especially for my lawyer clients that are so fixated on understanding why they're doing something, the vision planning that we do at the very beginning of crafting any exit plan is one of the key steps that we have to go through. We have to understand where you're trying to get to. Because if you don't pay attention to, your actual destination, we might take the wrong route. We might end up somewhere you don't want to be. And we've already had that experience, right? You took the route of going to law school, putting in your time, maybe showing up at a firm that looks great on paper, but you don't love the culture there. We don't want to repeat those same mistakes. So I walk my clients through a series of questions about what they want their life to look like. What kind of law do they want to practice? Do they even want to be a lawyer anymore? Are they interested in some other type of business or endeavor? What lights them up? What are they passionate about? How do they want to spend their time outside of the office? Do they have a family? Do they want to spend more time with them? Is it important that they're there to pick up their kids from school in the afternoons? Where might they want to live in the country? Are they wedded to the city that they live in now, or do they only live there because they work at a particular firm and that's where the home office is? If they had a life in a different city, what would it look like? Are we thinking rural? Are we thinking metropolitan? Are we thinking suburbia? What does their day-to-day life experience look like? What kinds of things are important to them? What are they saving for? What do they have time for? These are all of the questions that I want my clients to be thinking about before we start mapping out a financial strategy, because sometimes you need to leave right away. Your hair's on fire and we have to deal with getting you out of a toxic situation. That may mean saying yes to a job that you otherwise wouldn't take, but you need to take it just to get a little bit of relief. However, if we have some time to think about where you might want to end up, that also means we might have some time for you to start building up reserves, to start creating some of that cushion to make the transition easier and maybe to take some future financial obligations off your plate. And so that's part of the strategy in terms of figuring out where do you want to get to and how fast do you need to get there. And that's what we do with the vision planning.
That's a smart approach. And I think you're right. It's kind of balancing between whether someone needs to offboard quickly or whether they have a little bit of time to kind of coast and figure out what those next steps are. But you hit something interesting on the emotional aspect. How do you prepare people for that component of financial planning? And particularly when people are coming from Biglaw or the SEC or big environments like that?
So I think so much of money has to do with emotions. And it wasn't until I started doing this work professionally that I really understood how little of a role the numbers play. And so oftentimes with my clients, they just want numbers. They think they just want numbers, right? We all know they probably want more, but they think they just want numbers. So I will often give them the numbers. I will give them the answers to their questions, and then I will see what kind of a reaction it elicits from them. If the numbers are very clearly pointing in a particular direction and they still have a lot of resistance, that means there's an emotional issue that we need to deal with, we need to address, we have to process in order to be able to rationally and objectively review the numbers and make an informed decision about what next steps we're going to take. So whenever I'm working with my clients, the first thing that we do is we do a little exploration of their history with money. What has their relationship with money been? What kind of memories pop up when they think about money? What's the first memory that they have about money? Oftentimes, it's not a great one. It might involve parents fighting. It might involve lights being turned off. It might involve, a car being repossessed, or it might involve being at a store and being told, no, you can't have that thing that you want because we don't have enough money, or seeing your friends having things that you don't have. A lot of that can really get embedded in how we then react to money in our own lives. And so I always spend some time exploring that with my clients. And then we take a look to see if any of those behaviors are popping up now. They won't look exactly the same, but they may have some of the undertones from earlier experiences. We want to explore that. We want to see how we feel about things. And we also want to take a look and see if we want to continue to behave in that same way. Are those feelings and those decisions serving us given where we want to go next? And so I have those conversations with my clients, and they do a lot of reflecting in terms of their relationship with money and what they want it to look like moving forward. And so we do some of that work, and then we go back to the numbers, and it's a completely different conversation because now they're coming at it with a new set of eyes and with an awareness and an understanding and a grace that they're giving to their old self for having made the decisions that they did and now wanting to move forward.
I love that phrasing, a grace to your old self. As we wrap up, there's so many people coming from diverse financial situations. How do you adapt for each client?
So everything that I do is hyper-personalized. Part of what I found frustrating about the personal finance world was it seemed like there were all of these rules and a lot of them didn't apply to me. I always like to be the exception to the rule. I think as attorneys, we are trained to differentiate cases in order to make our own point, right? Or to undermine the point of the other side. And I often find with my clients, whenever a particular guideline is brought up or, a financial rule is brought up in a conversation, they're quick to differentiate why it doesn't apply to them or why it won't work or why it isn't a good idea. And so I find that the hyper personalization really gives people the confidence that whatever plans you're putting together, whatever strategies you've devised for them, whatever systems you're creating for them will actually work, because they've tried other boilerplate, cookie cutter type solutions and they've been disappointed with the results. But when they work with me, they know that so much care has gone into deciding what strategies really fit with their personality, with their values, with where they're trying to get to. And we've taken their numbers. I'm not using, basic standardized numbers of whatever average Americans do on a typical day. I'm using their numbers. And so they just walk away with so much confidence that these plans can work for them because they can see it on the paper, exactly how it would work, pending, I don't know, something like a pandemic. Barring some global catastrophe, right, these plans really will work if they implement them, and they're able to implement them with confidence.
Fantastic point to wrap up on. Everyone, thanks so much for tuning in to Beyond Big Law. For more insights and to connect with Jessica Medina, visit jessicamedinallc.com. Also find her on social. Jessica, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more amazing videos like this one.